Welcome to A Slob Comes Clean, the podcast. I am Dana K. White. I share my personal deslobification process. As I figure out ways to keep my own home under control, I share the truth about cleaning and organizing strategies that actually work in real life for real people, people who don't love cleaning and organizing. Thanks for joining me today. This is podcast number 451, and I think I'm going to call it Declutter Without Making Decisions. Okay, so here's where I'm going with this. The fear of making decisions is generally a big part of the fear of decluttering, right? It feels like the stuff that I'm going to have to deal with is a bunch of decisions to make. And that's overwhelming, right? Because decisions feel very final, right? And they're not necessarily, but they feel so final, and it feels like I have to know what I'm doing. I have to feel confident that I'm making the right choice if I'm going to make this decision. And so there's all this fear around decision making. You know, I've heard of clutter being referred to as delayed decisions, right? Like things that I haven't already made a decision on yet. And I think that that's valid. I think it's true. And I'm as always, I say that if it helps you, think of it that way. Like if just acknowledging that clutter is delayed decisions helps you, great, right? But here's what I'm going to say for those of us who struggle with clutter like me, is a lot of times things are not necessarily, yes, there are absolutely delayed decisions within the clutter for sure. But then because clutter attracts clutter and piles attract growth of pile, or however you want to say it, the reality is that some things that are just not even decisions at all, like it wasn't that I delayed a decision to put that baggie that I had brought my sliced apples to my office in, that's not a delayed decision. It's just I set that down, right? But when I just think of all clutter as delayed decisions, it can feel like, okay, well then that's a lot of decisions to make because that's a really big pile, or that's a really full closet, or that's a really ready to topple shelf, or whatever it is, right? And so I present to you the idea that you can declutter without making decisions. If you're new here, welcome. So I have my 5-step no mess decluttering process, right? Like this process I designed to help me make progress and only progress. And I do say going item by item, final decision by final decision, and acting on that final decision, right? And so I'm not like reinventing the wheel here. I'm just looking at this from the perspective of, if decision making is your reason that decluttering is so overwhelming to you, let's look at it from the perspective of you can declutter without making decisions, all the way to step 5. And that's what I'm going to go through. I'm going to go through my 5 steps and talk about how you're making progress following the steps without making decisions. Now, yes, it's a decision, right? But it's, the pressure is not there. I'm not making this big daunting decision until step 5. And by the time you get to step 5, if you have started with step 1, y'all, every space that I declutter, I use my own 5-step process because it keeps me on track and it just works, right? I use that, and every time I face a cluttered space, I feel overwhelmed. It's fact. It's how it goes, right? Like just literally 2 weeks ago, my daughter was home on spring break. She had like oral surgery or whatever, so we had some just down days where she's recovering, she's relaxing, and I'm like, I'm going to get stuff done around the house because it helps me to have those weeks where I'm like, and I tackled my garage. I'm so excited to share it in a YouTube video next year because, I do all my videos ahead of time, right? So that my son Reed can edit them over the summer. But I finally, like, I'm sure you've heard me mention, if you've been around a while, we moved into this house however long ago, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years now. And I've still got some boxes that I've never dealt with in the garage. Well, guess what? I finally dealt with those boxes. And I'm like so incredibly proud of myself, right? That was a big one. I looked at that space and it caused me to feel overwhelmed and caused me to want to shut down. And I was like, nope. Well, actually, I didn't even say that. I didn't even say, no, Dana, no. I didn't talk myself out of it. I just said, I have a process to follow. I'm going to follow this process. And the process works in every situation. I do the same thing when I, get behind on the kitchen and it's embarrassingly messy. And I'm like, oh, no. I have a process. I use my decluttering process on that too. Why? Because first of all, having a process means I don't have to invent a way to do this. I have a process to do. I don't have to decide how to declutter. I have a process for doing that. But even the steps themselves of my No Mess Decluttering process remove the decisions from them until step 5. And even then, it's the container making the decision, not me, right? But I say right, and if you're new here, you have no idea what I'm talking about. We're going to get to that, right? But I am ready at that point. I am ready to make the decisions because I have a different perspective on myself. I have a different perspective on my stuff. I have a different perspective on my space. I have experienced success. I am a different person by the time I get to step 5 and I'm ready to make decisions. But the beauty is that I have made a ton of progress before I ever made decisions. So let's go through this. Step 5 is the container concept. Okay. Spoiler alert. The container concept, the short version is this: space is finite. It does not expand because I want to keep more stuff, right? The purpose of a container is not to keep stuff in it. It's to serve as a boundary. It's to contain. It's to create a boundary. And then as long as I stay inside that boundary, things can stay under control. If I go outside that boundary, if I try to keep more stuff than will fit in the space, then there is no hope of it ever being under control, right? So carried all the way out, my entire house is a container. Every shelf is a container. Every drawer is a container. Every container is a container. Like each space within my house is the limit to how much stuff I can keep. And when I view things that way, it changes everything, right? So I no longer am saying, is this a good item? That's a hard decision, right? To say, am I ever going to need this? I have no idea, right? I can't predict the future. Is this a valuable item? Do I love it? How do I feel about it? Those are all decisions. Those are daunting, right? And a lot of those things I don't know. I have feelings about it, but is that love? I don't know. So all of those decisions feel very daunting. So I've removed that from it. Instead of the value decision on this item, either whether I value it or it is valuable, I am instead letting the container decide. So even in that, the container is making the decisions for me. I am saying, this is the size of the container. I'm going to pick my favorites. I'm not deciding necessarily. I mean, yes, I am deciding at this point which ones are my favorites, but that's very different from rejecting something. These are my favorites. And then the container draws the line and says, that's as many favorites as we can have. I may love the other things, but I can't keep them and my space be under control, right? So the real decision there is, do I want my space to be under control, or do I want to have the stuff at the expense of my space being under control, right? But at that is the point where I'm making decisions, but I'm ready for that because of the first 4 steps. All right. So step 1, trash. Obvious, decision-free trash. Start with the trash, because when you start with the trash, it gives you a thing to start with. It gets you moving immediately. It helps me to start to see everything that's in there because I'm looking for trash. I am looking for non-emotional, decision-free trash. Here's the thing. When I say trash, if you find yourself looking at something and thinking, oh, and I did a whole podcast on this recently, right? Like the whole podcast was about how it's not possible to struggle with obvious donations, right? It's not possible to struggle with trash because the whole point is that it's decision free. Like I'm specifically talking about the things that are decision free. So because of that, I'm skipping over anything that feels like a decision at this point. And I'm just getting out the trash because it gives me something to do. It makes the space less visually overwhelming with every item that leaves. And I'm starting to build, like, I always say, I find trash all through the process. Yes, step one is trash. I look for trash. I deal with that trash. I put it in the trash or the recycling, whatever I've got, right? But I'm going to continually find trash. Sometimes it's because I uncover something that I didn't see before, but other times it's because something didn't appear to me as obvious trash in the beginning. But the more obvious trash I get out, the more something else becomes obvious trash, right? And so, yeah. Okay, so step 2 is the easy stuff. This is by definition the stuff that doesn't require a decision. It's the stuff I already know what to do with, right? All I'm doing is I'm identifying the things that I already know what to do with those things. I go ahead and do that to get them out of the space. The space becomes less visually overwhelming. And when I come back to it, I'm ready to move on to the next thing. Okay. But I've gotten out trash, I've gotten out easy stuff. Those are all decision free, right? I find again and again and again, especially a space that I had decluttered at one point and then it, got recluttered so many times. It is just trash and easy stuff. I will feel like this is a full on decluttering project when I start. And then when I actually get going on it, I do the trash, I do the easy stuff, and I'm like, oh, yeah, actually, that was all there was. And it was not a single decision. But when I looked at it, it felt like a big old pile of decisions, right? So much of the progress in a space is trash and easy stuff. Step 3 is donations, obvious donations that made me go, duh, why was this not already gone, right? And it's just giving myself permission to go ahead and get more stuff out without any emotional energy being spent. Okay. Like I am not talking about the things that I should get rid of. I'm not talking about the things that it's the stuff that, oh, well, I can get that out of here because it has no decision to it, because it has no emotion involved in it. Right. So those first 3 steps, I always refer to those as my decision-free, emotion-free steps. Those are the steps that I recommend you zero in on when you feel like you have no decision-making energy, because it is always worth it to go through those 3 steps or any one of those steps on any space ever. It's going to be significantly better. You're going to feel better about your space. You're going to be successful. You're going to make decluttering progress. You're not going to be done, right? But you're going to make progress just with those first 3 steps, especially if you go into it saying, I don't have emotional energy. I cannot make any decisions right now. So I'm going to do these things, right? Like that is really, really powerful. So much progress can be made with just those 3, by definition, decision-free steps, right? So then we get to step 4. Now, this one is the one where for today's purposes, we're going to call it decision-free. I feel very firmly that this is decision-free, but it's also a way to make decisions, right? Like these are the items that they're not easy. They're not trash. They're not an obvious donation, meaning it feels like something I think I would like to keep, right? And yet this space is a disaster. I used to always say, I think I remember I did a post early on about organizing my laundry room. And this was before I had realized and acknowledged and given myself permission to experience the power of just decluttering, right? Like I felt like everything I was doing was organizing, right? When in reality, decluttering was actually the thing I needed to be focused on. I didn't know there was a difference between organizing and decluttering, right? So I remember, and it was also before I had my no mess process. So I had pulled everything out of the space and I'd made this big, whatever. And I remember saying something about, I can get started, usually, sometimes, but I always get down to where I have all these little things and I don't know what to do with all these little things. I would say that. I hear that from you all the time. Step 4 is a way for me to deal with all those little things that I don't know what to do with. And so, yes, I am making a decision about what to do with them, but the process that I use to make that decision is actually instinct as opposed to decision. It's a way for me to learn, acknowledge, and act on instinct as the way to make the decision. So it's not an angsty decision like, oh no, what do I do? Where does this go? All those things that I thought were the things that I needed to be doing. Instead, I boil that down into 1, 2, if I can't answer the first one, instinct-based questions, right? So the first question is, if I needed this item, where would I look for it first? That is not a decision. That is acknowledging an instinct. Because this item was not easy, which means it does not have an established home in my house. Okay. So we're not saying it's easy to answer this question. It might be hard to acknowledge your instinct, and yet it is an instinct, which means that if I am agonizing over it, I'm doing it incorrectly. If I am deciding where I would look for it first, I'm not actually doing this. I'm not actually answering or asking this question correctly. I need to acknowledge the instinct instead of decide the place. So what I mean by that, this item's not easy, right? But you pick it up and you're like, well, yeah, I would, okay. Where would I go looking for this? If I needed this item, where would I look for it first? You're picturing yourself at the beginning of a 3-hour process of searching for this item. Like that's the picture in your brain. That's the assumption of what it's going to be. That's the past experience that you're drawing from, is tearing your whole house apart looking for an item. This feels like it would be one of those items, right? So we're going to go with the instinct of where's the first place that I would look? What's the first drawer I would open? What's the first cabinet door I would open? First closet I would look in? Where in that closet would I look? And then I am going to take it to that space right now. There's really not a decision there. It is instinct. It can feel difficult, especially when you don't have the experience of this, especially when you don't trust that you're ever going to find anything. It's really zeroing in on, okay, what's my instinct of the first place where I would look for this? Okay. And I do that. And then I take it there now. Taking it there now is not a decision. If you're following my no mess process, you know that the take it there now is actually the key to not making a bigger mess when I declutter, right? Like that's actually the hinge of the door that separates messy decluttering from no mess decluttering. So like that is the key. That is the key, is to take it there now. And I know you have to make yourself do that. I know you don't want to do that. One of the ways that I tell myself and get myself to do that thing and make it not feel like this, I'm deciding, I'm committing to doing this, is say, you know what, I'm just going to see. I'm just going to see for the sake of reminding myself of this thing that I've written books about. So I totally know it works. And I hear from people all the time who are like, this is the game changer. This is the thing that changes everything when I take it there now. But I know for a fact. And yet I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to try it out again and just see. And I do. And every time it works. Every time it's shocking the impact of taking it there now, that things just literally disappear. Literally this space only gets better and only gets better. And when I set it aside and I don't take it there now, that's when I really do have to then go, okay, at what point am I going to finally deal with this stack of stuff? Am I going to deal with it when I stop for the day? Or am I going to wait until I'm done with the whole project? Because I often stop before I'm done with the whole project, right? And if I don't deal with it today, then when am I going to deal with it? When am I going to come back to the space? Those are all decisions. But if I take it there now, I don't have to make those decisions. This is how I know it works for me to do the no mess decluttering process, is to take it there now. So I go ahead and I take it there now, and then there's no decision to make, right? Because I acted on instinct and then I took it to that place. And yes, I do have to, that is where the container concept comes in. Okay. If that space is full, then I do have to acknowledge, okay, so yes, this is a decision about what am I willing to get rid of in order to create the space for this? Ideally, it's going to be trash, which is decision free. Oh, yeah, that's right. That should go in the trash anyway, or recycling, or obvious donations. Oh, yeah, that's obvious. It just takes a moment for me to go, that's right. I got to get rid of something, but I'm still going to get rid of, ideally, I'm going to get rid of something that is decision free. Okay. So I'm going ahead and I'm acting on that. If I can't answer the question, where would I look for it first? Then I go to my second decluttering question. I don't ask this one first because this is where I get into a big argument with myself. If I was asked to ask the second question first, that's when I argue with myself, okay, which becomes the decision thing. And then I'm okay. But if I have a place where I would look for it, I go ahead and take it there now, acknowledge the reality of that space, give it a place to be by getting rid of something that is decision free, right? But if I don't have a place where I would look for it first, then I say, if I needed this item, would it ever occur to me that I already had one? That's actually not a decision. That is acknowledging reality. It's admitting, not deciding. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's not a decision. And somehow that makes it easier for me. Instead of me saying, Dana, I need to get rid of this thing. I need to decide to get rid of this thing because I probably wouldn't even remember that I had it. That's a decision. That's an internal argument. That's a lot of angst and emotional energy for me. Instead, saying, if I needed this, it's a yes or no question. If I needed this item, would it occur to me that I already had one? Because I didn't have a place where I would go looking for it. It's a yes or no question. Would it occur to me that I had one? Would it not occur to me that I had one? Okay, if it wouldn't occur to me that I had one, that's really not a decision. It's just admitting the facts that I would probably go buy another one. And I'm trying to declutter right now, not bring in extras of things that I already have, because that was the problem. That was a big part of the reason why I had so much clutter, was that I had so much stuff in my house. I had no idea where it was, no idea what I even had, because I had so much stuff, because things didn't actually have places to be and things were in the bottoms of piles. And so therefore, it didn't cross my mind that I had it because I was so overwhelmed. And also, sometimes when it did, I just was like, I don't have it in me to go looking because I have no idea. So I'm admitting and I'm acknowledging reality as opposed to making a decision. Okay. Now I know this is a stretch and some of you are like, this still feels like a decision. Okay. But you have a process for making a decision. This is a way to think of it. If decision making is your fear, know that you can make tons of decluttering progress before you ever make a decision. Y'all, if you get out the trash, if it's going to look so much better. If you get out the easy stuff, it's going to look even better. If you get out the obvious donations, it's going to look so much better. If you go through every last random item that is in this space that you didn't know what to do with and that didn't used to have a home, this space is going to look a whole lot better. And you are now a different person. The action that you have taken of making final decisions without actually decision making, right? But instead acting on instinct and acknowledging reality. You're different now. This space is different. Okay. You're now a person who has less clutter. You're a person who knows how to significantly positively impact a space. You're different. You have less clutter. You have a significantly better space than you had before. You're a person who knows what was in that pile. Okay. You know exactly what you have in this space. You know where things are that were in this space that even have a new home. Why? Because you put them in the first place where you would look for it, right? So you know what you have a better space. You're a person with significantly fewer decisions in front of you to make than you had before, even though you technically didn't make any decisions to get here. But the person you were before felt like you had so many decisions to make. The person you are now knows that you have so many fewer decisions to make than you thought you had to make before. Okay. So you are different than you were. So by the time you get to the fifth step, where we are acknowledging, okay, everything in here now is something I would look for in this space, and yet it doesn't all fit in this space. At that point, looking at what is left and saying, okay, out of all these things, I'm going to remove and donate my least favorite things. You're not the same person saying, what's my favorite and least favorite, that you were if you would have started with what's my favorite stuff, what's my least favorite stuff back in the beginning, when also there was a whole bunch of trash here. And there were things that you had no business wanting. Of course, you didn't want it. It was an obvious donation. When you had things that already did have homes and didn't need to have any kind of decisions made about them. When you were looking at all of that stuff, if you had asked, okay, I'm going to get rid of my least favorites, it was overwhelming because it felt like, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to get rid of so many least favorites. And in reality, there were a lot of things that were in no way favorites that didn't even deserve to be asked those questions about that you would ask at this, final fifth step of acknowledging the realities of the space. Okay. So you're a different person by the time you get to step 5 and you're ready. You have been successful. You know what you're doing. You've started to see what this space could actually be, right? It's no longer an abyss. It's no longer a big old pile. It is so much better because of the decision-free stuff that you did, that you're like, okay, I can actually see how this could work. I can actually see the future for this space. And that excitement gives you energy as opposed to draining energy. So at that point, you're actually getting to the end of step 4 with more energy, more emotional energy than you had when you started. And that's counterintuitive for the person who is scared of decluttering because of the fear of decision making, right? It feels like, here's this big old pile. If I was ever to get to the end of it, I would be just absolutely dragging myself along because all energy would be completely gone by the time. Instead, you have more emotional energy because of the success, because of your feeling confident and competent in this process, right? So remember, here's the other beauty. Remember that our goal, our meaning us, y'all listening, right? People who we follow this no mess process. Our goal is always better. We've changed the goal from we're going to get this space completely decluttered to we're going to make this space better. That mindset shift is incredibly powerful. I am going from this idea that what's the point if I don't get it done, right? To, okay, now I do get it, right? Like now it all makes sense to me. Okay, so our goal was better. Every item gone is better. I am counting that as success, which is the thing that allows me to get started when I know that I can stop at any point because I will have achieved better. When I have this idea that, oh, I've got to get it all the way done, and I'm not following this progress and only progress mindset and strategy, then it feels like, what is the point of starting when I know I'm not going to have the energy or the time or whatever to finish. But because I know that I can stop at any time because my goal was just better, and every item that leaves, making a final decision about it is progress and is legitimate, achieving of the goal of better, That's the thing that lets me get started, right? So remember, things to celebrate. Every item gone is decluttering. Every item gone is better. Every item gone is real, legitimate progress. Every item gone is worth your time that you're spending in this space. So you can declutter without making decisions because it counts as decluttering, even if you don't get to that fifth step that requires decisions. Even if you are like, I'm sorry, I can't view step 4, asking the 2 decluttering questions, as not really making decisions. I just can't. I know I'm using instinct, but I just can't view that as not decisions. Okay, it's still worth it to go through the decision-free steps. You can declutter without making decisions because those first 3 steps are by definition decision-free. And because our goal is better, that is legitimate decluttering. So you can declutter without making decisions. But even when you go all the way through to step 5, which is the goal, right? Like that's how we finish a space and make it organized, really. Going through all 5 steps is worth my time, and ultimately it is decision free. And remember too that that 5th step even, okay, has 2 parts to it. The first part of the embrace the realities of the space, okay, the implementing the container concept, the first part of that is consolidate. It's putting like items together. So we are down to only the items that I would actually look for in this space. The first part of that 5th step is completely decision free. It is simply, without pulling everything out, moving like items together. I'm going to put all my water bottles together. I'm going to put all of my, insulated cups together. I'm going to put all of my coffee cups together. I'm going to put the glassware together. I'm going to put the plastic restaurant cups together. Just doing that, it is decision free. It is part of the process because it naturally means if I'm doing that, I'm touching every single item, I'm acknowledging every single item, and it goes from drinking thing to plastic cup that is completely, everything is rubbed off of it. I don't even know what it was, and nobody drinks out of this. Okay, actually, it becomes an easy thing, a decision-free, easy item, or trash, right? As I do that, I naturally go, I have how many non-insulated water bottles? And actually, nobody in our family drinks anything except out of insulated water bottles. Actually, those become easy, right? So just that act, that part of step 5 that is the consolidate, is by definition decision free and helps us get rid of even more to make it even easier once you get down to the point where you're picking favorites. All right. And even picking favorites is instinct. But even if you want to think of it as a decision, deciding what's the best, great. You are a different person at that point than you were when you started. And even if you're not ever ready to get to that step, you are so much better off for having done any of the steps, because the goal is better, right? So you're better off. All right. I hope this was helpful. I will talk to y'all next week. Don't forget my newest book, Jesus Doesn't Care About Your Messy House, is the spiritual side of my deslobification process. I would love it if you go and check it out. If that's something that is interesting to you, I really tackle hard the misconceptions around what the Bible says about cleaning, but also just really diving deep into the shame issue, which is such a difficult thing for so many of us who struggle with clutter, right? Okay, I will talk to y'all later. Bye.